call came at 1:55 a.m. on a number that hadn't yet been assigned to my phone. The screen read Penumbra Hotel, wake desk, and underneath, a digitized voice. "Good morning, Quinn. This is your wake-up call. The time is 1:55. We'll call again at 2. I work as an audio archivist. I digitize the things people go out of their way to forget. Answering machine tapes, call center reels, college radio, cassettes that sound like a ghost learning to whistle. I know what audio should sound like. This sounded like a building breathing through a human mouth. When the call clicked off, the ceiling fan above my desk kept turning, but the air didn't move. On my work table lay a reel-to-reel I'd picked up that afternoon at a salvage auction. Penumbra Hotel, wake desk, 1998-2001. Rotted tape, handwritten spine label, the kind of thing you buy for the romance of trying. On reel 2, track 17, a woman's voice whispered the same thing I'd just heard. "Good morning, Quinn." I hadn't yet hit play. I told myself I needed sleep. I told myself all hauntings sound like fatigue, at least at first. 5 minutes later, at 2:00 a.m., the phone rang again. I didn't call the number back. Archivists don't engage, we preserve. I threaded the tape onto the Atari, cleaned a capstan with alcohol, and let 1998 roll into the room. The Penumbra's wake desk had a repertoire: chipper male, maternal female, stern night manager, all reading the same text with different weather. Between them, live operators popped on to say things operators always say. "Sir, that's not my department." "Ma'am, I can transfer you." "We don't do apologies after midnight." Then, on track 23, a line I hadn't seen on the leader log rattled down the head like a coin on metal. "Do not allow dreaming." It wasn't the voice of a person. It was the voice a corridor would use if it learned to talk. It gave a room number 617 and a time 2:13 a.m. and then charge the wake fee. The wake fee wasn't in any manual I knew. I wrote the number down anyway, because archivists write down things we don't yet understand. At 2:13 a.m., the phone rang for the third time. "This is your final courtesy wake-up call," the voice said. "To avoid being charged the wake fee, please acknowledge now." I didn't answer. The line went to see I did the Penumbra Hotel was a real place, but only if you looked at the right years with the right kind of eyes. It operated from 1927 to 1971, closed, reopened in 1995 as a boutique rebrand, closed again in 2002 after an investigation into irregularities in accounts and staff retention. Then it sat in municipal limbo. A name on unpaid tax rolls, a box on a demolition schedule that never got a signature. On the map, the block was labeled parking to come. On the street, an Art Deco ribcage of limestone and brass, hunched between two glass office towers. The revolving door had been taped into compliance with a red X. Someone had scrubbed the name from the canopy, but the shadow of the letters remained like a watermark under the rain. I brought a flashlight, my recorder, and a copy of the reel because ghosts listen too, sometimes to their own voice, sometimes to yours. I told my boss I was taking a sick day. He told me to bring back anything with a number on it. The revolving door resisted and then remembered its job. In the lobby, dust had organized itself into a polite carpet. The front desk's switchboard was still there, banks of jacks, cords like black vines. On the counter, a bell that had lost one chime, a ledger open to the page where ink had eaten through paper. The line above my eye-level read, "Wake fee, house policy since 1933. Checking in," a voice asked, and even though voices like that are a kind of ventriloquism, I turned. The night clerk wore a suit the color of sleep-deprived dawn. His name tag said wake desk where it should have said a person. "I don't have a reservation," I said. "You do," he said mildly. He slid a long brass key across the counter. It was heavy enough to persuade a door and probably a person. The fob read 617, non-refundable, 2:13 a.m. wake-up requested. He tapped the ledger, and the entry reached up through my eyes and pulled my name into it. Quinn M. Would you like to place a card on file for incidentals? What are the incidentals? Minutes, mostly, he said. We keep the change. I'm not staying, I told him. I'm here for research. We don't distinguish, he said kindly. The Penumbra is a hospitality. We don't ask whether you need rest or an answer. We ask what time you want to be woken. He slid over a do not disturb hanger. On the back, printed upside down in tiny letters, do not allow dreaming. Is this a joke? I asked. He smiled the way a bell smiles when it knows it's about to be rung. Only to people who pay late. The elevator sighed like someone trying to remember the tune. 6 was the kind of floor that thinks it's private. The hallway was too long by one door. I counted 603, 605, 607, 609. Someone had eaten 611, 613, 615, 617. And then, tucked where an angle shouldn't be, a second 617. This one without a peephole, the number stamped into the paint like a regret. My key chose the first 617, the normal one. Inside, a bed, a desk, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub that had seen everything. The window looked down into a light well where day had gone to practice being night. On the desk, a phone that had the good manners to be black and heavy, and next to it, a card with Wake Desk printed in a font that had been expensive once. I set my recorder on the nightstand and pressed record. I hung the Do Not Disturb sign. I lay down on the bed and told my body to pretend it was tired. I was not going to sleep in a place that sent me a call before it existed. But pretending is a useful prelude, the way listening is a useful way to look. At 2:13 a.m., the phone rang. "Good morning, Quinn," the voice said, the one that belongs to buildings. "Wake up call. The time is 2:13. I lifted the receiver slowly, like bait. "Who requested this?" "You did," it said, "when you booked." "I never booked." "You did," it repeated gently. Before what?" "Before you learned to dream again," it said, and the line made the sound of paper being turned in a thick book. The second 617 door handle turned on its own. Not a full rotate, just the suggestion of a guest who half changed their mind. On the phone, the voice smiled. "Please acknowledge to avoid the wake fee." "What is the fee?" I asked. 5 minutes, it said. "Of what?" It sounded pleased to be asked. "We call them minutes. You might call them a pause, as if conferring with a guest only it could see. Pieces. I'm not paying. Everyone pays," it said. "The question is what you get for it." The line went to sea again. The second 617 door was ajar now, just enough to be the difference between privacy and invitation. Beyond it, instead of room, I saw phones. 10, 100, 1,000. A narrow hall lined with wake-up phones that didn't have cords because they didn't need them. The air smelled like hot dust and wet iron. I took the key. I took my recorder. I took a breath that belonged to somewhere else, and I went in. The wake corridor had no ceiling. It had time where a ceiling should be. Each phone wore a neat little card in a brass frame with a name, a room, and a time. Some cards were blank, waiting like napkins. Some had ink bled into cotton so thoroughly the letters looked like a bruise. A brass plaque at the entrance read, "Each guest is entitled to be woken exactly once." I lifted one receiver and heard a storm far off, lifted another, and heard cutlery the way you do from downstairs at a hotel where you've paid too much for breakfast. On the 5th phone, I heard my mother's voice. She died when I was 21, in a house where the smoke alarm worked and we did not. It was grief's most ridiculous cruelty that we slept through the thing designed to wake us. She'd left me a box of cassettes, where she had read audiobooks in our kitchen, the dishwasher, an occasional ocean behind Dickens. I hadn't listened in years because her voice made time wrong. Now, in the penumbra, her voice said, as if picking up a conversation between baking and bills, "Quinny, it's late. Don't fall asleep at your desk again. Set your alarm, baby. 5 more minutes, and then really sleep." The line clicked. The next phone rang before I could lower the first. "Don't," someone said behind me, and I turned with the shame of being caught inside a sentence I had no right to. She was short, my body's shape if it had learned to move closer to the ground. Her hair pinned with the kind of pragmatism people call grace when they see it in others. Her name, tag read operator. Underneath, pinned crooked like a person had done it for themselves. "Alack, you work here," I said, which was something between an observation and a mistake. "We all work here eventually," she said, eyeing my recorder like a cat eyes a hand. "You're the audio one. Archivist. How did you?" She gestured to the phones. "We cheat," she said easily. "Staying up late to listen to things that were meant to be heard once. You smell like it." "What is the wake fee?" I asked. I didn't bother being clever. People who run systems don't like clever unless it's on their card. 5 minutes, she said. "If you don't acknowledge the wake, the hotel keeps 5 minutes you would have had. It does good things with them sometimes. It uses them to start breakfasts on time, to hold elevators for guests who run, to finish songs after the band leaves. And other times it buys silence," she said, and the word made the corridor briefly colder. "The penumbra doesn't like dreaming. Dreaming disrupts the route. We are a hotel. We prefer itineraries." "Who asked you to call me?" I said. "I didn't book." She tilted her head, as if listening to a ringing only she could hear. "You did," she said, "when you put your mother's tapes in the closet and told yourself you'd listen when it hurt less. That isn't the same thing." "That's exactly the same thing," she said kindly. "Room 617 requested a wake at 2:13 every night since 1999. It won't pay. The charge rolls." "What's in 617? "Everything you'll owe if you keep telling yourself you can't be woken without somebody else paying for it," she said. "Show me," I said. "If I show you," she said, and now her voice had the careful patience of a night nurse, "have to choose what to pay with. Nobody leaves the penumbra uncharged, not even staff. I'm not staff. That's what we all said the first night." She lifted one phone and didn't put it to her ear. The line spoke anyway. "Good morning, Quinn. Final courtesy call. The time is..." I hung it up. I couldn't stand hearing my name spoken with that particular intimacy by a building. Operator A. Lack kept her hand on the receiver and met my eyes. "We can settle this, Quinn, but accounts won't let you go on a curiosity rate." The account's office lived in the kind of basement that makes you believe feet were invented, so we'd have somewhere to put fear. Bare bulbs poured a patient, carceral light. On the wall, a calendar with every day circled in red. That was the joke. The manager sat behind a glass window designed to keep honest people from raising their voice. He looked like a person who would say, "I don't make the rules," and mean it in the way a tide does. "MS. Quinn," he said, finding my name with the speed of a person who always knows the number they mean to dial. "Welcome back. I've never been here." "You have," he said. "You left minutes on file with us. Unclaimed." "Take them," I said. He smiled the way a scale smiles when it knows the weight. "We can't," he said. "They're not ours to spend until the ledger balances." He slid a statement through the slot. Columns labeled arrival, wake, acknowledged, fee, balance. Under room 617, my name appeared in several decades. The entries swam a little and then decided to be still. "What's in 617? I asked again. "A bed that keeps receipts," he said. Someone refused to be woken until she was ready to sleep right. She ordered that as a condition of her stay. We applied the fee. The wake rolled. She went elsewhere. Who was she? "A guest of record," he said, the way a surgeon says mass. "I want to see the wake engine," I said, surprising myself. The phrase wasn't mine, but it felt like it belonged to my mouth. He looked bored for the first time. "Everyone thinks the engine is the secret," he said. "Everyone wants to see the pretty clocks and the big switch. Fine." He pressed a button. A door unlatched somewhere with a sound like a hand leaving a cold railing. "Bring a minute," he said. "You'll need to spend it to look." "I don't have." "You do," he said, as if reminding me I had elbows. "That song you never finished because it made you think of her. That laugh you backed away from in case it ran out. That last 5 you kept. We take pieces. We call them minutes. Same thing." A lack who had followed silently and now wore the expression of a nurse driving a car touched my sleeve. "You can choose which," she said, "or the Penumbra chooses. It's better when you do." "I don't want to lose my mother's voice," I said. I didn't plan to say it aloud. "You won't," she said, very carefully. "You will lose how it warms your mouth when you say her name. You will hear her, but you won't feel like you're about to tell her something anymore. Or you can pay with music and keep the heat, or pay with anger and keep the song. There isn't a right answer. There's only balance. What do you suggest?" I asked, because sometimes it's good to let people in these rooms instruct you in your own morality. "Pay with a minute you earned by pretending you hadn't," she said. I had one of those, and it tasted bitter the moment I looked at it. The night of the fire, when I told myself I had been asleep the whole time. There had been 5 minutes after the alarm when I woke, texted someone "you up" and told myself I'd get up in a second. I had never confessed that to anyone, not even to myself in the particular way that counts. "Take that one," I said. The manager's face relaxed by a fraction of a millimeter. "Now you're speaking house policy," he said, and stamped my statement tender, accepted. Behind him, a switch closed with a private thrill. The engine room wasn't a single machine. It was a choir. Clocks, alarm clocks, carriage clocks, station clocks the size of planets, hung from ceiling rails like a congregation of halos. Phones stood in rows like soldiers waiting to be excused. Metronomes marched toward some private shore. None ticked the way they should. They cohered, a sound that was both many and exact. At the center, like the conductor who pretends the orchestra would otherwise forget, a woman with white hair and hands the color of blueprint paper adjusted a board of sliders labeled earliness, grace, apology, stay, retry. Her name tag read clockkeeper. The only other thing on her suit was a pin. 5 more minutes. "You're on the Quinn account," she said without turning. "It has been a pleasure and a chore. I didn't ask you to. Your mother did," she said, picking up a phone and setting it down to a different rhythm. "She called from her kitchen and asked us to make sure you woke when you were most likely to hate us for it. She adjusted apology down and grace up. We aim for resentment that isn't terminal. How long have you been doing this?" I asked. "The Penumbra has always woken people who prefer itineraries to dreams," she said. "We used to send boys with sticks and pennies before windows. We banged pipes. We knocked on the bones of the building. We rang bells. People think time is a river. It's a hotel corridor, and the doors open every hour. The bell says so." She flicked a slider labeled hour until it sat neatly on 2. The engine's sound shifted minutely, as if someplace 70 rooms away, a guest stopped pretending sleep and blinked into being awake. "What happens to the minutes you take?" I asked. "We use them to buy quiet," she said. "Hotels depend on quiet. They depend on time doing what it's told. Who pays for the quiet? People who don't answer their wakes," she said flatly. "People who keep someone else waiting. People who let smoke have a clearer path to a bedroom." I didn't flinch because she wasn't looking, and I didn't intend to give her the thing she thought she had earned. 617, I said. "I need to see it." "You will," she said. "Once you decide whether you want the Penumbra to keep waking you for the rest of your life, or whether you want to take the job." "What job?" She smiled. It wasn't unkind. "Wake desk," she said. "We like archivists. You already keep records. We need someone who knows how to tell a stranger it's time, and do it kindly, and not mind when they hate hate you for it. You'll be paid in quiet. The benefits include leaving when you choose. That last part's a lie, I said. It is, she agreed pleasantly. But you do get to choose how you stay. The Penumbra's 7 wasn't like other floors. The carpet was a blue that kept changing its mind. The wall sconces wore shades that looked like eyelids. The numbers were velvet. 617 had its peephole taped over with a small square of white. Someone had written on the tape, in a hand that was neat only to people who never get to write while standing, "Don't let her dream." Lack stood aside. On the first ring, "If you intend to wake," she said softly. On the second, "If you intend to keep." On the third, "If you don't know the difference." What happens on the fourth? The building stops pretending it's a hotel, she said. I knocked 231, an old housekeeping rhythm my hands knew because you live in enough hotels in your 20s, and every room adopts your bones. I waited through the first ring, through the second, and on the third I put the key in. It didn't turn. It pressed back, not a refusal so much as a request. "What do you want me to say?" I asked the door, because sometimes that works. The peephole tape released a little sigh. A voice on the other side, the corridor's voice, the one that belongs to buildings, said, "Acknowledge." "I acknowledge," I said, and the key went the rest of the way like my body had snuck ahead while we were talking. The room beyond wasn't a room. It was 5 beds stacked in light. The first night I slept without setting an alarm and woke in thunder. The second when I slept through a friend's call and told myself they'd call again. The third when the smoke alarm chirped and I dreamed it into a bird. The fourth when I taped the alarm because I hated its voice. The fifth when I told myself even grief gets 5 minutes. On the sixth, an unmade bed waited with my name on the pillowcase. "Now," I asked Lack. "Now," she said. I lay down. The bed recognized me the way a key recognizes a lock. Ceiling above me wasn't a ceiling, but a recording head the size of a night sky. A phone rang under the bed. "Good morning, Quinn," my mother's voice said, close enough to save my life if I let it. "Wake up, baby. Don't do that thing where you promise yourself 5 more minutes." "I'm awake," I said, wrecked. "Say it so the building believes you, Lack said, and I understood. The Penumbra wasn't asking for words, not as the currency. We've all got words in a pocket. It wanted tone. It wanted the sound a promise makes when it intends to be kept. "I'm awake," I said again, and I meant it. It felt like standing in cold water and choosing to stay. The phone went still. Somewhere, a receipt printer sighed in relief. "Wake fee cleared," the corridor said. "Balance?" I asked, because if you've ever waited for a hospital copay while pretending not to shake, you ask. "0, it said, and then, after after a little theater, pending gratuity. What does the Penumbra want for a tip? I asked, sitting up. It wants you to work here, Clockkeeper said from the doorway, because of course she was there when a thing ended, the same way she had been there when it began. We have a shortage of staff who can tell the truth and still be forgiven. And if I don't, I asked. It will keep calling, she said simply. Not nightly, narrowly, at the wrong times. You will hate us more efficiently. So will your friends. You'll call them. We already do, she said. You'd be surprised how many people put their lives on snooze. I left 617 and followed the blue carpet to the end of the hall where hotels put their surprises. There were 3 stairs, an elevator, and a painted door that read service only in letters that knew they were lying. The stairs go to later, A. Lack said. The elevator goes to before. The service door goes to home. Which one is out? None, she said. But if you take home, you can pretend longer. And sometimes pretending is a kind of mercy. Which do you take? I asked. I take service, she said. I like to carry things. Clockkeeper looked bored of our morals. Choose, Quinn, she said. I put my hand on the service door. It was warm, which meant someone recently used it. It swung easily and smelled like laundry and rain. On the other side was the street I had come from, at a time of day that couldn't decide. I didn't step through, not yet. What happens if I take the job? I asked. Not tonight, ever. You answer the phones at home, Clockkeeper said. You say good morning to people who hate you, and you stop hating them back for it. You save lives by making them angry at the right minute. You fail and live with it. You remember names without needing a ledger. You never sleep quite right again. In exchange, the Penumbra stops calling you when you can't answer. And my mother, Clockkeeper's mouth softened. She stops worrying you in the precise way she has been worrying you, she said. She gets her minutes back. She will not call. She will visit. That's worse, I said. Clockkeeper's eyes creased. It is also better. A. Lack leaned her shoulder against the door, like she could take its weight into her. You don't have to decide tonight, she said. You cleared a fee that should have taken years if you'd insisted on doing it the hard way. That buys you breathing. What do I owe to leave right now? I asked. A tip, Clockkeeper said. Of what? Apology, she said. You owe someone I'm sorry I made you wait while I practiced regrets in the shape of sleep. You can pay it to the Penumbra, and we will accept. Or you can pay it to the person, and the building will be jealous, which is always instructive. I closed my eyes. My mouth did the math I had been refusing for 6 years. When I opened them, I had a number and a name at 3:05 a.m. I stood in the narrow hallway in front of my own apartment door with my phone pressed to my ear, dialing Lee, the friend I hadn't called on the night that ate a city block of my life. She answered on the first half ring, the way people do when they were going to be awake anyway. "Hey," she said carefully. "Is everything?" "I'm sorry I made you wait," I said, and the words came in a single breath that was truer than any plan I might have made that night. And every night since, when I practiced this apology like a song I was never going to perform. On the other end, silence did that thing where you think it's about to hang up, and instead it becomes a room. "Okay," Lee said finally, in a voice that had not moved into forgiveness and wasn't required to. "Thank you for calling. Do you need me to be awake with you right now?" "I think I'm already awake," I said and laughed, and it wasn't the laugh of a person who had fixed anything. It was the laugh of a person who had stopped pretending. From somewhere many rooms away, as if through the bones of a building, a bell rang twice, then once, then hush. The Penumbra did not send me a receipt. It sent me weather, mornings that arrived 5 minutes earlier than they used to and insisted on being kept, rain that stopped when I said out loud, "Enough," and started when I said 5, a heat that broke at 2, 13, every afternoon like a joke I got to tell first. At work, I put the Penumbra reels into acid-free boxes and labeled them Wake Desk and Do Not Allow Dreaming and Ledger Retention. I didn't listen for a while, then I did, the way people take down a small suitcase from the top shelf when they know they're going somewhere soon. Ivy, in this building, the switchboard wasn't a person, but in my phone it sometimes pretended called only once more. "Good morning, Quinn. This is your wake-up call. The time is whenever you think it is. Please acknowledge. I'm here," I said. "Housekeeping thanks you," Ivy said, click. I didn't take the job that night. I also did not. I left the service door standing a little open in the back of my head, the way people leave a porch light on when the person they love says, "I'm on my way," and might mean it. My mother visited, not as a voice from a machine, not as a dream. The first time I was making rice and burned it a little and swore, and she laughed from the doorway the way a person laughs when the truth has been told by accident. "You're up," she said softly. "I'm up," I said, and didn't cry. The crying would come later, at a stupid commercial, at a song in a pharmacy, at a hotel lobby with a fountain that sounded like it had learned politeness. When it did, it felt like paying a bill I'd been pretending hadn't arrived. You don't get a medal for staying awake. You get tired. 3 months later, after a week of rushed jobs and 2 funerals for people I had loved while sitting to the left of them at long tables, I fell asleep at my desk with my head on a real box. At 1:55 a.m., my phone vibrated across the table and into a coffee cup. The display said unknown. I let it go until the 4th ring. "Good morning," I said, exhausted. You're late, clockkeeper said, not unkindly. We have a child on 9 who asked for 5. His mother asked for none. The manager wants 2. What do you want? I asked. A person who can tell the truth and be hated for it, she said. I want someone who can say, wake up, and mean I'm here. I want you, Quinn. Or a version of you who will do. Will you take the job, or should we keep calling you like an ex with better hours? What's the rate? I asked, which is the only joke I had left. Minutes, she said. We keep the change. Where do I work? I asked. Home, she said. We've modernized. The switchboard likes your kitchen. It says you have good tiles. What if I fail? I asked. You will, she said. And then you'll call back. That's the only part that was ever hard. I looked at the corner where my mother always showed up when I got rice right. It was empty. I looked at the service door in my head. It was standing in a draft. Okay, I said. Wake desk. I can do that. You already have been, clockkeeper said. And if she smiled, it wasn't the kind of smile that makes you feel short. Here is a thing I learned. 2:13 a.m. is when the stupidest fights begin and the bravest apologies happen. It is when people tell other people come home and mean I'll leave the light on. When pills get tipped down sinks and bottles get shotgunned and voicemails get deleted unheard. It is when fire alarms chirp and people dream them into birds. It is when hotel rooms decide whether they are rooms or disguises. Wake desk looks like a kitchen table. It looks like a sticky bar at Lobby 0. It looks like a hallway where you put your hand flat on a door and feel breath on the other side. It sounds like ringing, and sometimes like knocking, and sometimes like quiet, because the person on the other end left their phone in their coat on a chair by the door that isn't going to open unless you say a certain sentence in exactly the right tone. Good morning. I say into the circuits the penumbra set up through my walls. It's time. Who is this? Men ask, as if authority could make them safe. Who told you to call me? Women ask, as if authority could make them forgiven. You did, I say, and mean it kindly. Before, sometimes I tell them a joke. Sometimes I tell them a fact. Sometimes I say 5 more minutes and set a timer and call back and say now. That is the mercy. That is the job. Sometimes I fail. On those nights, the metronome on my shelf leans into one ear so I won't hear it. Like a friend at a bad performance trying to make your applause feel less alone. On those nights, the manager signs something I don't see and my phone goes face down. And I stand in my kitchen with my hand on the tile and breathe the draft from the service door. My mother visits less. When she does, she looks less worried and more nosy, and I prefer it. She knocks 231 on something that isn't wood and then hush. I answer. I'm awake, I say. Me too, she says. Finally, here is a thing I learned. 2:13 a.m. is when the stupidest fights begin and the bravest apologies happen. It is when people tell other people come home and mean I'll leave the light on. When pills get tipped down sinks and bottles get shotgunned and voicemails get deleted unheard. It is when fire alarms chirp and people dream them into birds. It is when hotel rooms decide whether they are rooms or disguises. Wake desk looks like a kitchen table. It looks like a sticky bar at Lobby Zero. It looks like a hallway where you put your hand flat on a door and feel breath on the other side. It sounds like ringing, and sometimes like knocking, and sometimes like quiet, because the person on the other end left their phone in their coat on a chair by the door that isn't going to open unless you say a certain sentence in exactly the right tone. Good morning, I say into the circuits the penumbra set up through my walls. It's time. Who is this? Men ask, as if authority could make them safe. Who told you to call me? Women ask, as if authority could make them forgiven. You did, I say, and mean it kindly. Before, sometimes I tell them a joke. Sometimes I tell them a fact. Sometimes I say 5 more minutes and set a timer and call back and say now. That is the mercy. That is the job. Sometimes I fail. On those nights, the metronome on my shelf leans into one ear so I won't hear it, like a friend at a bad performance trying to make your applause feel less alone. On those nights, the manager signs something I don't see, and my phone goes face down, and I stand in my kitchen with my hand on the tile and breathe the draft from the service door. My mother visits less. When she does, she looks less worried and more nosy, and I prefer it. She knocks 231 on something that isn't wood and then hush. I answer. I'm awake, I say. Me too, she says. Finally, last week, the Penumbra called with a house account. Someone in the hotel, a guest of record, refusing to acknowledge their wake for the 21st consecutive night. 617. Again, I asked clockkeeper. Always, she said. We believe she's waiting for you. Why me? People prefer to be woken by someone who has already paid the fee, she said. I went. The revolving door had not aged. The lobby had not learned anything it did not know in 1933. The wake desk clerk nodded like I owed him change. 617 was blue and polite. The taped peephole read in different handwriting. Let her dream just once. I knocked 231. I did not hush. I said Mom as if it were a job title. Good morning, Quinn, said a voice that belonged to the part of the building that remembers what rooms were for. final courtesy call. "I'm here," I said, because that was the truth, and it turned the key in a lock I couldn't see. The door swung in. The 6 beds weighted with sheets like paper. The 7th, my unmade, looked like the sea when it erects itself for theater. "Wake up, baby," my mother's voice said, not from under the bed, but from the seam where wall meets ceiling. "We're late." "For what?" I asked, ridiculous. "To leave," she said. "I don't know how," I said, and even then, after months of practice, the sentence tasted like copper. 5 more minutes, she teased, affectionate, and then, "No, really, now." I lay down on the 7th bed, because sometimes you get to perform trust the way you perform awake into the phone for someone who cannot remember their own name. The bed didn't recognize me, why would it? But I recognized the pose of a person who has stopped pretending they can outwait a morning. "I acknowledge," I said. My voice made the sound a receipt printer makes when it gets to tear on the right perforation. The blue drained from the room the way anger drains when a joke works. The corridor's voice said balance. The manager didn't appear because there was no paperwork for exact right. When I rose, the peephole tape had fallen. The words on the floor rearranged themselves as if written on water and then decided to dry. "Home is a room you're allowed to leave." "Are we done?" I asked clockkeeper in the hall. "Never," she said, pleased. "Not while people sleep, but you're paid through morning." "What time is that?" I asked. She checked a watch that had many hands and no numbers. "Whenever you think it is," she said, 2 nights ago at 2:13 a.m. My phone rang and I answered and said good morning in a voice I have grown into. The person on the line didn't ask, "Who is this?" They didn't ask, "Why are you calling?" They said, in a voice I recognized before I could make my instruments be polite about it. Checking in. It was me. Not the me who keeps the wake desk. Not the me with the tiles and the reels and the rice. The me whose mother had just died and who had not yet paid anything to anyone except in resentment. The me who believed 5 more minutes was how you pray. "Yes," I said, which was not the plan. "I have your key right here." I told myself I would hang up and let time do what it knows how to do without me. I didn't. I booked me into 617 for a night it had already ruined. I promised to ring. I promised to be kind. At 2:13, I called myself. I heard my own voice say hello like a person who is too tired to be angry. I said, "Good morning, Quinn. This is your wake-up call. The time is now." I waited for me to ask, "Who is this? Who told you to call?" I didn't. I said, "I acknowledge," and the line made the sound of a building exhaling a decade. The Penumbra didn't send me a receipt. It sent me light at 6:00 a.m. that wasn't yellow or blue, but a exactly the color of awake. It sent me silence at 2:13 that was earned and therefore mine. Sometimes, when I pass a hotel and hear a bell I know too well, I put a hand flat on the door and wait for 231 hush from the other side. Sometimes nobody knocks and I go home and answer the phone anyway. There are other Quins on other lines. There are other yous. And there is always a wake fee. The trick is to pay with minutes you stole from yourself, not ones that belong to anyone else. The trick is to say I'm awake and mean I'm here, even when you aren't ready, especially when you aren't prepared. The trick is to know that home is a room you're allowed to leave, even at 2:13, even after 5 more minutes, even when the building that loved your sleep more than your life offers you quiet in exchange for dreams. If the phone rings at a time that seems like it might not count, answer it. Say good morning. Say I acknowledge. Then, before the building decides to charge you